Hi. I wanted to make this video because I've been thinking, and this time I've been thinking about retirement. So the reason I've been thinking about retirement is because I'm in my 50s now, so it feels like it might be the next big milestone in my life. But yet I've never given any real thought to it before. I couldn't really decide if it's something scary or something exciting. So I decided it's time to start digging a bit deeper into the subject, and I've come up with a few things that I'd like to share. So, as I mentioned, retirement isn't something that I've ever given much thought to, other than joining the pension scheme at work a long time ago. And even that was just a case of ticking a box and accepting that the payments would be coming out of my salary. And then I just got on with living my life and gave it no more thought at all. But now I'm in my 50s, the idea of retirement isn't quite as abstract as it used to be. But does that mean that I need to start thinking about it now? Or do I just wait and then think about it if and when it happens? So I guess the first thing to make sure I understand what retirement actually means, I just had a vague idea that people stop going to work and start claiming a pension instead. And that's about it. And maybe for some people that is about it, but I've started to hear that other people treat it as the start of an exciting new chapter in life, and one that needs to be planned for if you want it to go as well as possible. So now that I've started thinking about it, I really like the idea of it being the start of an exciting new chapter. So I want that to be my approach. And just thinking about it in those terms has really changed my thoughts about retirement and made me realise that I am ready to start thinking about it and making some plans so that I can really look forward to what's ahead. Maybe if you're watching this, it's a subject of interest to you too. So I just want to start by saying that I do sometimes have a bit of an issue with planning for the future. And if you've seen my video about trauma, you'll probably understand why. But the reason it's important for me to say it is because I know that it'll have an impact on my decisions about my future. I feel quite strongly about living for today and making sure that I don't put my life on hold, for a future that, may not come. And so I know my situation might be a bit unusual, but really, I think it doesn't matter what your background is. Nobody's guaranteed to have a long life. So, living a good life now has to be high priority. I think it's good to feel clear about that. And, I feel really clear about that. And I think it will mean that any changes I need to make for the future, they need to be easy to incorporate and, they mustn't make my life now any less fun. So that's my nice, simple guideline that I think will help me make decisions about planning for the future. So I intend to keep reminding myself about that guideline as I go along. So, where do I start? So the same place really that I always start, and that's by doing some reading, researching around the subject. And now that it feels so relevant to me, it's been easy to find the motivation to learn more about it. And it's been fun to get stuck in. It's a big subject, but I want to make sure it feels approachable. So I've decided to narrow it down into 5 main themes that seem to be the most important when you're planning for a great retirement. So, in no particular order, they are money, health, hobbies or interests, relationships, and attitude. So from all the things that I've read, those seem to come up time and again as being the main pillars of a great retirement. So I want to look at each of them in more detail, but I don't want to get overwhelmed by it. So I'm planning to tackle one subject at a time, and, hopefully decide on some easy and some achievable actions that I can take now to set me on the right path for a great retirement in the future. So as I put money on the top of the list, I'm going to start there today. So it definitely seems important to plan for having enough money in retirement, but how much is enough? I think the answer to that is going to be different for everyone, but I think there are some general guidelines that can be followed by anyone. So to me, the two big questions to answer are, how much will my life cost and how much will my income be? And ideally, you want those numbers to at least match, and preferably also a bit of spare income for anything unexpected. So let's take the first question, how much will my life cost? So I was a bit daunted by this question, but actually it wasn't too bad once I sat down with my bank statements and really focused on the question. I noted down all of my regular expenses, as well as the things that come up less frequently, like quarterly or yearly, so that I could really get an idea of my total annual costs. And it actually didn't take me that long to figure it out. But then I next needed to decide which of those costs would still be relevant in retirement and which I could cross out, such as any costs associated with going to work. I then thought about any new costs or increased costs that I might have in retirement, things like increased travel costs or maybe increased healthcare costs. Some of those numbers did have to be a bit of a guess, but I still think that that's good enough to at least feel that I have a rough estimate of how much I might need for a retired life that's, similar to the life I have now. So the next question was, how much will my income be? Again, that's a personal question based on individual circumstances. But for me, I have a private pension through my employer and a state pension from the government. My husband also has a private pension through his employer. So I had to find the latest pension statements from our employers for an estimate of what the annual pensions will be if we continue to pay into those pensions until we retire. And then I looked on the government website to find out how much our state pensions are likely to be and what age we can claim them from. I then added those figures together to find out what our overall retirement income is likely to be. So I guess this is the drum roll moment. Well, I was quite surprised and pleased to find out that the two figures were a good enough match to make our retirement look achievable. So with a bit of luck and maybe some small tweaks, we should be able to afford the sort of life that we currently have when we're retired. We both come from quite modest backgrounds, so we're not really big spenders, which probably helps when you're looking at this sort of thing. If we wanted lots of luxuries, we would definitely need more money, but we feel okay with the level we're at now, and that seems to fit okay with our retirement income, which seems like great news. The only slight negative is how far away that retirement date is, especially for the state pension. But, maybe the lure of trying to bring that retirement date forward a bit might help me to find some opportunities to maybe make my money work a bit harder for me. So I did decide to have a look. So now that I've all the figures in front of me, it was a bit easier to look for potential opportunities. I already mentioned that there wasn't really any room in my budget for luxuries, so I would quite like to do something about that if I can. So I like the idea of setting up, a separate savings account that I could know was planned for luxuries. But then how can I save money without making any sacrifices in my life now? So, that seemed like it might not be possible, but with all my financial details in front of me, I was able to do a quick review of my regular expenses. And I'm slightly embarrassed to say that, with just one quick phone call, I was able to cut my monthly mobile phone bill in half by moving away from an unlimited package to one that was a closer fit to my actual usage. And that took me less than half an hour to sort out, and it was quite a big saving. So I decided to immediately put that saving amount each month into an investment account for the future. And it's a change that I won't notice at all because I was paying it anyway. So that passes the test of being easy to do and, not making my life now any less fun, which is perfect. I feel good about that because I know I've taken a step towards a great retirement. And just making that small change really brought home to me that it's definitely worth putting a bit of thought into this now, and trying to make a few small changes for a better future. And just that one change will add up to quite a lot, by the time I reach retirement, if I keep it going. So after making that change, I felt quite motivated to look for some others, so that I can top up that investment account a bit more. And I have managed to make a few switches to my food shopping that I don't really notice, like buying more frozen items that are a bit cheaper. I also made a decision to start selling a few clothes and other things from my cupboards that I don't want anymore. And that decision has the added bonus of helping me to, start scaling back on my possessions, which is also something that I'd like to do more of as I get older. Having less stuff in my cupboards and more money in my savings was really a recipe for feeling good. And it really hasn't been much trouble at all. It's funny because if I hadn't decided to make this video and to start really putting some thought into the future, I wouldn't have done those things. And I would have missed out on those opportunities that are potentially going to make a big difference to my future. And it's also helping me to build the excitement for what might be ahead. So I quite wish I'd done it sooner, but there's no point thinking like that. I'm just happy that I've started doing it now. And I haven't stopped looking for other opportunities, so hopefully I'll still be able to find, some more ways that I can cut back without really noticing. I'd love to know if anyone else has any tips to share about that too. So I'm really pleased that I've taken the time to look at my numbers because it feels good to know that I'm on the right track for a good retirement, without having to make too many big sacrifices now. I'd really recommend taking a look at your numbers if you haven't already, because if you do find that you need to make some changes, it's better to find that out sooner rather than later. So we've tackled money in this video and had a closer look at what the income and expenses of retirement might look like. There's plenty more to look at when preparing for retirement, but I'll tackle those other things in separate videos. I'm hoping to tackle them in a similar way to how I've done this one. So I'll look for ways to assess my current situation and then aim to make small, achievable changes that will help to put me on the right track for a great retirement. I think I've got plenty of work to do, but I'm looking forward to digging into each of those subjects and, and sharing what I find out. So, going back to the original question, is retirement something scary or something exciting? Well, I definitely think something exciting, and I can't wait to get on with learning more about what I can do now to set myself up for the best retirement. So I hope you've taken something useful from this video, but I think that's all for this time. Thanks for watching and hope to see you next time. Bye.